All right. So for today's video, what we're going to do is we are going to talk about Jefferson's presidency. And it is the end of the week, so you can already tell that my voice is a little flustered. But we're going to do this anyway. So what I want to do is talk about Jefferson's presidency. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about Madison and Monroe. So with Jefferson's presidency, I wanted to remind you guys that when Jefferson starts his presidency, it's after the election of 1800. So he does start in 1801. And when that happens, he's coming in after Washington and Jefferson. So he's only the third, he's coming in after Washington and Adams. So he's only the third president that we have. So we are still a very, very, very young country. So when he starts his presidency, he's coming in after Adams. Adams did everything in his power to make sure that he was that he kept neutrality and isolationism to the best of his ability. And with that, it did cost him power in the Federalist Party. So the Federalist Party, that's why a Democratic Republican ended up winning next. So this is the election that Hamilton, there was a tie. Aaron Burr was his vice president, and Aaron Burr was going to eventually run. Hi, Mr. Whiteley.
Hello.
He was going to, he actively ran against Jefferson. So when Jefferson comes into presidency, it's a little bit, and mainly because Hamilton was a big part of that reason and was a big reason for breaking that tie in Congress. So once he gets into office and he starts getting things going, he learns right away that over the past several years and two presidencies, that the United States has been secretly paying the Barbary countries, and Tripoli specifically, about $2 million a year to leave our merchant ships alone. So we talked a lot about it in class. There's that map on page 230. And on that map, it shows you the Mediterranean Sea, and it shows you the very small entrance, and then the northern part of Africa. And we needed to get into the Mediterranean Sea in order to trade with northern Africa and then the southern part of Europe. So it was very important for our economy to be able to trade in and out of the Mediterranean Sea. The northern countries of Africa knew this, and they took advantage of this. So we were paying them $2 million a year, which $2 million is a lot of money today. And this was way back in the day, right? This is during Jefferson's presidency. So $2 million a year to leave our merchant ships alone. So what they would do is they would get a hold of one of our merchant ships, and then they would hold the crew for ransom, hoping that the United States or like the cruise company would pay them that money, and then they would let the crew go. So we were paying them $2 million a year to not do that at all. So he comes into the presidency with all of this backstory that he was unaware of. So once he gets in there, he decides he doesn't want to go to war. So he decides what he's going to do. He's going to send the Navy that Adams, before him, had asked Congress to start building. He's going to send naval ships into the Mediterranean Sea to protect our merchant ships. So they're not supposed to actively engage with the Tripoli pirates or the other Barbary state pirates. They're just supposed to protect our ships. And again, if you're an American ship, you're flying an American flag, and that's one of the big ways that they can identify you. So they're over there protecting our ships. As soon as that happens, that's when the ruler of Tripoli declares war on the United States. So it's kind of our first war after the American Revolution. However, we don't declare war on them. They declare war on us, and then we just kind of are like, we just want to keep our ships safe. But he's furious that we're no longer paying him. So therefore, he declares war on us and does start actively attacking our ships. So that's how Jefferson starts his presidency, right? So that's how he starts his presidency. And that's kind of where we're at in the Mediterranean Sea. So this goes on for a while. Okay, so as this is happening, we have other things starting to take place. So this starts happening right in 1801. He sends the ships over. They're supposed to protect our ships. And then that continues for a couple years. And then we move into 1803. And in 1803, that's when some big things are happening, right? So Great Britain and France are at war with each other, which has nothing to do with us, except for, once again, they're going to bring us into their drama. So it has nothing to do with us, but it has everything to do with us. So Great Britain and France are at war. So what they end up doing is, if we're trading with France, then Great Britain is attacking our merchant ships because they're upset we're trading with France. If we are trading with Great Britain, then France is attacking our ships because France is upset that we're trading with their enemy. So it has nothing to do with us, but it has everything to do with our economy because they're attacking our merchant ships, attacking our goods, and it's a negative on our economy. So that's what's going on, across or in the oceans, in the Atlantic Ocean. That's a big thing that's happening. But again, this is an extended amount of time. So it starts really impacting us in 1803 when they go to war. And this is, again, something that Jefferson has to be aware of. He has to figure out how we're going to handle it, what we're going to do, because it's his ships that are being attacked. And it's his economy. So as that's going on, we do get a very big and exciting thing to take place-ish, depending on how you want to look at it. In 1803, that is when Jefferson actually sends Monroe over to France in hopes of buying Port Orleans. So New Orleans is a phenomenal port. Remember, if you look at the map or the map we have in class, we looked at how it's right at the end of the Mississippi River. So it feeds into the Gulf of Mexico, which then opens up the center of what we now consider the United States to the entire rest of the world, right? So it opens up all of that farming. You no longer have to go over the Appalachian Mountains. You're able to float your goods down the Mississippi River, and you're able to get to the port of Port Orleans, get it into the Gulf of Mexico on a ship, and then get it out to the Atlantic Ocean and go from there. So Port Orleans is a vital port that we have no control over, right? So France owns this port right now. So we send Monroe over. Monroe is there to negotiate the purchase of just Port Orleans. Just Port Orleans, right? He gets there. By the time he gets there, it takes, 2 to 3 months to get there. By the time he gets there, it turns out that Napoleon is still in the Napoleonic Wars, is still fighting, and he's really short on men. I'm sorry, not men. He's really short on money. And on top of that, he does not want Great Britain to have any opportunity of taking the Louisiana Territory. So he doesn't really need the Louisiana Territory anymore because the territories in the Caribbean and in the more of the Latin American region are rebelling. And because of that, he doesn't need the Louisiana Territory for what he originally intended. He doesn't want Great Britain to get it, and he's in desperate need of money to keep his wars going and trying to take over Europe. So by the time Monroe gets there, it's perfect timing, and he actually offers Monroe the entire Louisiana Territory for $15 million. Which, again, we did a whole thing in class about like math and social studies, and we figured out what that would cost today. We looked at how much Michigan would cost. We looked at how much Lake Orion would cost. We looked at how much 1 acre of land in Lake Orion costs today, and we did all of this math to figure out like how cheap was that. It was unbelievably cheap. Now I understand $15 million is a lot of money. However, we doubled the size of our country with a signature. And when we did that, we doubled the size of our country, and we got Port Orleans, and it was like 3 pennies. Remember, I literally showed you the pennies. 3 pennies per acre of land. And then I talked about how in Orion Township a couple years ago, you could get an acre of land for $19,000, right? Not 3 pennies. So we got it for a steal, which was great. But with that, there were a lot of issues that Americans had with buying this huge chunk of land. So the 3 big issues that you're going to want to make sure you remember with the Louisiana Territory is that it did double the size of our country. So some people were like, yay, it doubled the size of our country. However, others were like, it just doubled the size of our country. That's a lot of land. So the second issue is it too much land to govern? Are we going to be able to govern it? And with that, the East Coast was very concerned, right? The original states were very concerned that as states developed and grew and became states in the Louisiana Territory, that they might be able to outvote the original 13 states, the original states, right? So they have a little bit of anger and fear towards that, where they feel like they should have the privilege and the right, and they're, I don't want to say necessarily more important, but they've been around longer. They're the ones that, created the country was based around, and they're worried that all of these new states are going to come in and be able to outvote them, and that's a big concern. So it doubled the size of our country. It might be too much land to govern. And then another huge argument was, is it unconstitutional, right? So nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the president or the federal government has the right or power to purchase land. It doesn't say they don't, but it doesn't say they do. So Jefferson, who is supposed to have a strict understanding of the Constitution, if it's not in the Constitution, then the federal government doesn't have the right. If it is in the Constitution, then they do have the right. Because remember, this is the argument he used against Hamilton and the national bank, right? He said it's unconstitutional to have a national bank because it's not in the Constitution. However, now that he wanted to buy all this land, even though it's not in the Constitution, he's saying, well, it's not in the Constitution, so we can buy it. So it's, and here is politics, right? Politicians love to say that they don't believe in this or that we shouldn't be able to do this. And then all of a sudden doing that same type of thing benefits them. And then they're like, well, maybe it's okay. And that's exactly what Jefferson did, right? So he's saying it's not in the Constitution. So technically we have the right to buy this land. So we did. Okay. So we bought the Louisiana Territory. It was a little hypocritical of Jefferson, but it doubled our country. It doubled our opportunity to grow. But the number one thing I want you to remember is, whose land are we buying? Is it France's land? No. The Native Americans have been there for thousands of years. It's their land. We are playing Monopoly, right? Like, we are buying and selling land that theoretically it does not belong to any of us. It's Native American land. The tribes have been on this land. It's theirs. And no one is having realistically that conversation with them. Nobody is having that conversation of buying and selling land from them. We just made a deal with France. We bought all of this land that realistically wasn't France's land to give away in the first place. It wasn't France's land to claim. Before France claimed it, Spain claimed it. It wasn't Spain's land. It was the Native Americans' land. So again, there's this whole other story where I say, when we talk about how great it was that we doubled the size of our country, that is great, but at what expense? At cost to whom? And it's that Native American side of the story that we started talking about with this purchase, and we're going to start talking more and more and more about, is the Native American side of the story. So right here, we just bought a huge chunk of land that the Americans are excited to move into and start claiming and farming and whatever, and they're going to be moving into Native American territory that they've lived on forever, that is theirs. It's their land. So, and we're going to get there when we talk about the War of 1812 and then with Monroe, and we're going to definitely get there when we talk about Andrew Jackson, which I already gave you a warning on when we get to Jackson. Oh, Jackson. So we buy this land. We have those three concerns. And then Jefferson, though, is excited because, remember, he's the agriculture guy. He's the plantation owner. He's the guy that believes farming is the way. Farming is what everybody should be doing. That's where we're at. So he is hoping that the Louisiana Territory is going to help us grow a country and a nation with farming. All right. So as we keep going, the Great 1804 is what we titled it in our notes. And this is when Jefferson is really forced to deal with Tripoli and the Tripoli pirates. So he's bought the Louisiana Territory. We're going to figure out the Louisiana Territory. Great Britain and France are at war with each other. And now he has to deal with the Barbary pirates and the Barbary states and the Tripoli state and the Tripoli pirates. So while the merchant ships are in the Mediterranean Sea, and again, this is a very simplified version of the in-depth history that you can do and the research you can do and the reading. And I told you there was a great book you could read if you were interested in pirates, if they interest you, in a real life story, which is Jefferson, and I believe it's literally called Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. So you could read that if you wanted to. But so he has to start dealing with the Tripoli pirates, and our Navy that's in the Mediterranean Sea, they actually start getting a little bit more aggressive with Tripoli, and Tripoli starts getting more aggressive with us, and we start attacking the land. And when that happens, our Navy is able to, for the most part, significantly damage Tripoli. And like I said, there is more detail, but this is a review. So they ended up going and, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so we start getting more aggressive with Tripoli. Tripoli starts getting a little bit more aggressive with us. We take our attack a little bit more ship to land type attacks, and Tripoli isn't able to keep up with us on that. And finally, Tripoli kind of sends up the white flag and says, we would like to make a peace treaty. So we end up making peace with Tripoli. So the deal is the United States will pay them $60,000 to get our crew back. However, originally, Tripoli was demanding $3 million, and we said no. So we gave them $60,000. They gave us our crew back, and then Tripoli promised that they would leave us alone. They would not be attacking our merchant ships anymore, which sounds fine and dandy and great. But the problem was Tripoli the only pirates we were worried about in the Mediterranean Sea? No, they weren't. It was the Barbary states, right? So the other Barbary states continued to attack us. So Tripoli stopped for the most part, but the Barbary states continued, and they continued for years after until it kind of naturally ended. So kind of keep that in mind. So we do end the issue with Tripoli, but we still have all those other 4 Barbary states that are still attacking us, attacking our merchant ships, and holding our crews for ransom. So it's the unofficial war with Tripoli is now done, and there is a treaty signed. But like I said, it's not all rainbows and butterflies, because the other Barbary pirates are part of still attacking our ships. So in the year of 1804, we then have the 12th Amendment passed. So the 12th Amendment is the one that we listened to the song in the Hamilton soundtrack, right, where we talked about the election of 1800. And that was the whole Jefferson, they decided to run. Jefferson and Aaron Burr ran together. Jefferson was running for president. Aaron Burr was running for vice president. But because of the way our Constitution wrote the Electoral College and how they had to vote, they each got half the votes, which meant they tied, right? So technically, they had to break the tie within Congress. So they had to break the tie within the House. So when that happened, Aaron Burr decided, well, wait a minute, maybe this is my time to be president. Maybe I can do this. He starts actively and openly campaigning against the guy he ran with, which was Jefferson. And this is where Hamilton comes in, encourages his party members to end up actually switching their votes and voting for Jefferson. Jefferson ends up becoming president. When that happens, Jefferson and starts encouraging the passing of what we now call as the 12th Amendment, because they had to amend the Constitution, right? They had to change the Constitution to fit this two-party system that we have now created. Because again, remember to Washington, he warned us and begged us not to have a party system, to not have loyalty to parties, that it was going to rip this country apart. So, in, all reality, Hamilton and Jefferson didn't listen to that, and we have a two-party system. So we had to change the Constitution to fit that. So what they wanted to do was make it so the Electoral College actually sends one vote for the president, and then they vote again for the vice president. So that's how the system works today. When a president and a VP run together, the Electoral College will cast two votes. They cast a vote for the president, and then they cast a vote for the vice president, and that's how they win president and VP, right? So that's how that ends up working. And that's the 12th Amendment. So it happened because of the election of 1800, and it gets put into place during Jefferson's presidency. Also in 1804, right? That is when Jefferson goes ahead and puts into place the Lewis and Clark expedition. And we joked in class about how you were supposed to learn all about that in 5th grade. Oh, I haven't been moving enough. My light's timed out. Right? There they are. That's what happens when apparently you don't move enough. So sorry about that. So, Jefferson now has the Louisiana Territory, and within the Louisiana Territory, we don't actually know what's there. So he sanctions this expedition with Lewis and Clark, and they have 3 main goals that they're supposed to hit. 1, find the Northwest Passage, which Jefferson is hoping is a river, for the most part, that connects the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean, right? So it would cut east to west from the Mississippi to the Pacific, and it would open up that trade all the way to the Pacific Ocean, because right now, no matter what, we have to either go around South America or we have to go around Africa to get to that side of the earth. So we're hoping there's like a cut through. The second thing is they need to make positive relations with Native Americans in hopes that the Native Americans might be able to settle, they might want to settle down and start becoming a farming nation, which means they could assimilate into the American culture of that time. And again, realize that Jefferson's hoping that Native Americans want to give up everything that they know, not everything that they know, but change everything that they know and want to settle down and farm. And this is going into the Plains natives. And the Plains natives were, there were so many different tribes, but mainly nomadic in that they would follow the buffalo in the plains from the Plains natives. So they weren't necessarily nomadic in that they just followed wherever, but they had certain areas that they would go for the seasons, because that is what they had been doing. That's who they were, part of their culture and their background and their history, and as a people who they were. And Jefferson was thinking, oh, well, maybe they'll want to settle down and farm because that would work conveniently for Americans. Good plan. So that was the other part, make good relationships with Native Americans in hopes that they would want to become farmers and assimilate into American culture. And then 3 was to find out what in the world did we just buy, right? So we bought this huge territory and we don't fully know what's in it. So and again, the Lewis and Clark expedition, you could study and study and study and study on your own time. We're looking at it in regards to Jefferson. And Jefferson's goals were those 3 things. So we're looking at How did it go, right? It went okay, right? So, did they find the Northwest Passage? No. Why? It doesn't exist. It's not there. You can't find something that's not there, right? So, they did not find the Northwest Passage. The second one was the relationships with Native Americans. They did make positive relationships with Native Americans. So that was a positive. They met a ton of different tribes. Communication was tough because you got to remember different Native American tribes have their native language. They don't all speak the same language. That is ridiculous that Americans thought that. Like, no, they had different languages. They're different nations. It's just like different countries, but they were different nations, okay? So, with that being said, they did make positive interactions with Native Americans at that time, but this whole, like, settling down and farming thing, like, no. Eventually some did, but majority no. And then the third one was find out everything you can. Good news, that went amazing. They brought back priceless amounts of information on plants and land. And when I mean land, I mean geography, animals, anything that you, rivers, landforms, everything that you could imagine. And when I say plants, I mean like, think about going in, well, this is untapped land. So every type of plant they could get their hand on, tree, berries, flowers, everything they could get, they brought back. So lots of great information. All right. So then we move on to the end of Jefferson's presidency and we get into the Embargo Act, right? So Great Britain and England are, Great Britain and France are still attacking our ships. However, Great Britain isn't just attacking our ships, they're impressing our soldiers, and you need to understand the difference, right? So France is attacking our merchant ships, taking our goods or holding our guys for ransom and whatever. The British at this time are impressing our soldiers. And what that means is they would board our ships and claim that the men on the ships were runaway British soldiers. And they would claim that they could take them back. But they weren't. Maybe some of them were, but a majority of them weren't. So they were realistically stealing our guys off our merchant ships and forcing them into the British Navy. I'm not kidding. And if they weren't willing to necessarily do that, then they usually were kept in the bottom of ships, but they stole our guys and claimed that they were runaway British soldiers. So they were stealing our guys, which is a horrible thought and idea to even try to wrap your head around. So they were stealing our guys, in forcing them into their navy. And then you have the French, who are also still, right? So this started in 1803 was when it really started. We're in 1807 now. So Jefferson's trying to figure out what to do. He doesn't want to go to war. He does not want to go to war. So he's like, you know what? We're going to put an embargo on them. And an embargo is when you halt trade with, right? So what we end up doing is we end up saying, Jefferson puts an embargo act on all exported goods. So pretty much he shuts down our ports. And his thought process behind that is, oh, they can't survive without the goods and resources from the Americas, from the States. So we'll stop trading with them. And then their economy will tank. And from there, they'll stop attacking our ships and we can open up trade again. That's his mentality, right? How does it go? Not well, right? Not well. It doesn't impact France and Great Britain's economy very bad. You know whose economy tanks? Ours. Our economy tanks. It turns out we at the time could not survive without France and Great Britain. So it tanks our economy. Thousands and thousands and thousands, like 57,000 sailors lose their jobs, right? So your ports are shutting down. Your goods aren't going down. If people aren't buying your goods or trading your goods, the people making the goods are losing money. So you have the cotton plantation and the The tobacco plantations that are struggling, they would send raw goods over to Europe, who would turn them into cloth or other goods and then ship them back to the north, who would turn them into products. So we're missing this part of the triangle of exported goods throughout the United States and Europe. And that becomes a problem. So our economy tanks bad. And because of that, the American people really start to turn on Jefferson. So you have this man who we truly believe, when you think of Thomas Jefferson, you should think of the Declaration of Independence. And then we think about his presidency, and it didn't end on a very positive note, right? So you have this huge economy tank because of the Embargo Act, to the point where Congress has to repeal the act or take away the act in 1809. And in 1809, they repeal it and the economy starts to build back up. So does his Embargo Act solve our issue with Great Britain and France? No, it doesn't. Okay, so we have economic turmoil for nothing. We got nothing out of it. They're still attacking our ships. It's still an issue. And now our economy is suffering because we haven't been able to trade for 2 years, right? So you got to take risks sometimes in life, and this risk did not pay off. So he ends his presidency on this big negative of the Embargo Act not working, okay? So and then that goes into the next election, and the next election is where Madison ends up becoming president, and we're going to move into Madison's presidency as well. So that is Jefferson. I hope that helps. I hope that it's a review. Again, this is kind of how we went through it in class and how we are going through the different information. So hopefully this helps you study. And then, as always, you are welcome to let me know if you have any questions. So I will see you in class.